Here it is mostly stripped down. I used most of a can of lacquer thinner and some paper towels and nothing else. I'll get an old toothbrush and some Q-tips to get into the various nooks and crannies. Gone back and forth on what kind of veneer this is. Pretty sure it's mahogany. I'm trying not to let the red tint influence me and go just by the grain. Why do I say the color? Because this may very well have been stained and that soaked up the color. It seems to be an endless debate about whether or not they use stain versus only toner lacquer and dyes back then. I have certainly seen period publications from 20s, 30s where they mention stain. But terminology has changed over the years, just like varnish. What the heck is varnish? You don't even sell it anymore. Names evolve over time. I think varnish, what they used to call varnish, is now called polyurethane. The thing about stain is they were mass producing these, or at least semi-mass producing these. And stain takes a long time to set up, maybe even a day or two, versus toner lacquer is done in 5 minutes. So I don't know, but I can't deny that there is some color in the wood, but it's also possible that when you strip a cabinet and it dissolves the finish, the dye then goes into the wood. So anyways, this is what we have to deal with. Clearly this is a different kind of wood than this. Typically they would use secondary wood like poplar, and then they cover it with the more opaque type of finish to cover up the grain disparity between the two. You will certainly see plenty of radios sold as being refinished, restored, and it'll look like this, that they just clear coated. That is obviously a bit of a naive, amateurish way to do it. However, the one thing about refinishing, keep in mind, is you can do it again and again and again. So if you saw a radio that you didn't like the looks of, you can strip it and refinish it yourself. As long as you don't do anything damaging, like sand through the veneer or drill new holes in it, or something destructive, you can keep redoing it. And that's what I did when I started out refinishing. I think the first cabinet I might have done 4 times because I was not satisfied with the way things turned out, because I didn't do it right. Not even just the color, just the techniques I used and the way the finish ended up looking. Alrighty, while stripping this, I did reveal some more defects I had noticed. Like there's a crack on this board that runs along the back here. It doesn't go all the way through, but if I apply some pressure, I can get it to open up a little more. So I'll wick some glue down in there and clamp that up, and then around, I think it's the bottom on this side. Yeah, we have some more veneer separation. I think I missed this doing the first pass, but this is what we're left with now when we strip it down. I did not strip the inside. I did not strip the bottom. There's really no finish on the bottom anyways. There's just that nice old label that they appear to have put some type of coat. Oh, that's probably the glue underneath it. It's tempting to clear coat it with some kind of protective coating like acrylic, but I also don't want to damage it. Reproductions are available. This radio is not rare by any means, and plenty of people restored them, and reproduction labels and such are available. And it is damaged already, but I'm inclined to retain it if I can. Even after stripping, there is a bit of a color difference there where the escutcheons were. So when I stripped this, my intent was to get rid of the old finish, not necessarily get rid of every last trace of color or grain filler. But even so, this grain is really open now. So I will definitely want to be filling that in with grain filler to get a nice smooth finish. Again, there's plenty of people that would stain this and then clear coat it and then call it done, and by all means, if that's what you feel comfortable doing, go for it. But if you want it to look authentic, or if you just want to practice and learn about how they did it back in the day and they do it now for fine furniture anyways, is you fill in the grain. That's a very misunderstood concept, I think. I'm starting to get the comments, and I inevitably do whenever I refinish something, so let's have the talk. The pros and cons of refinishing. First off, I don't care what you do. I mean, quite frankly, if it's your item you purchased, be it a piece of furniture, radio, TV, at the end of the day, it's your property. You can do with it as you see fit. I have opinions, I have thoughts. I'm going to share those with you now, but that's the bottom line. Okay, in general, yes, the original finish or paint is the most desirable. Certainly if you're talking about a valuable antique, a piece of Chippendale furniture or something that's hundreds of years old, that's from a well-known maker and has an established significant value, some of those items, regardless of how bad it looks, the worst thing you could do is refinish it. Now when we get into stuff like this radio that's just shy of 100 years old and was mass-produced, and there's quite a few of them around, I don't think you're going to diminish the value much if you refinish it and you do a good job. Yes, again, as always, getting a pristine, all-original example is more desirable. And there are plenty of high-end collectors who have zero interest in restoring, repairing, anything. They don't care if it works or not. They just want to have the item in as good, all-original condition as possible, period. And then there are folks who want to just use the thing, maybe even to the point of putting a solid-state device inside of it. They think it looks cool and they want it to work, and that's all they care about. I totally understand that too. Where am I? I'm kind of in the middle of all that. I want to make it look as original as practical and to function as originally as practical. What do I mean by practical? Using materials that don't cost a fortune, that I can get fairly readily, that's close to what they did originally, and that is reversible. It's one thing when I refinish, I use techniques that can be stripped and it can be redone. No, the original finish, it will never be original again, but when you use things like lacquer and shellac, they're really easy to remove, which means repairs or touch-ups or even redoing it again is not at all difficult. There are other techniques that are more difficult to remove, and then certainly there are destructive techniques where you're actually drilling holes or modifying something, replacing the veneer or whatnot. So, in the case of this, keeping the original finish there. Well, this was already, okay, we had the issue of rodent droppings and urine soaked into the wood. So, I was able to eliminate that without really doing anything to the exterior of the cabinet. However, we had significant veneer separation around the perimeter, and that's going to keep getting worse over time. The original finish was very badly deteriorated in some areas down to bare wood. Problem with that is you need a finish not just because it looks nice, but it helps preserve the wood. When you're down to raw wood, you've got potentially a lot of issues. One, moisture will really do damage if you get any on there. It's more susceptible to fading from exposure to UV. If you put anything on it, Old English or waxes or oils or Howard's Restore Finish, whatever, on bare wood, it's going to soak right into it. Probably discolor it. If somebody ever does go to refinish it, it's going to be a different color than the areas where there was some finish remaining, which is going to make their job more difficult. So really, if you want to keep it all original, I'd say don't do anything to it other than maybe dust it. Don't try to put anything on it when there are areas of finish that are gone, because whatever you put on it is going to soak into the wood. It makes things much worse. So that's why I would say, one thing you can do is just clear coat the whole thing as is with like a satin lacquer, because then at least you're just sealing everything, making kind of a time capsule. It won't get any worse. So that's certainly an option. And I suppose I could have done that. I could have glued down the veneer and then clear coated the thing. But the lacquer that was left, I've seen this, I've been messing around with old cabinets for decades. When lacquer gets to that condition where moisture's gotten under it, it's discolored, it's turned yellow, it's gone cloudy, it's not really protecting the wood anymore, and it's really altering the appearance of it, and there's nothing you can do. You can't put anything on it because the lacquer itself has degraded. So I chose to refinish it. Now, if you happen to venture into social media, the various restoration forums and whatnot, and go into the cabinet restoration area, you will see plenty of opinions. And if you pose some questions, post photos of your project, plenty of folks will let you know what their opinions are, and they will tell you how you should do it, and they will tell you how what you're doing is wrong. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you techniques that I find work for me, that I've developed over the years. A lot of what I do came from seeing what others have tried and what worked for them, and some of it was trial and error myself. There are many ways to do it. There are many traditional ways to do it. I don't know exactly how they did it back in 1928 or 29. I've got a fairly good idea, but I don't literally know what products and what mixtures and what solvents they used, and even if I did, I might not be able to get them anymore anyways. So we're going to use stuff that you can actually go out and obtain without spending a fortune, and that are fairly easy to use, and you can get good results. And it's going to be a pretty close approximation of what it was originally. Will it be exactly the same as it was when it came off the assembly line? No. If I was to ever sell it, would I tell somebody I refinished it? Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I document the projects I do, is so people know exactly what was done to the items I work on. But I would never... Is it going to look exactly the same as it did when it came out? Will it look exactly the same as it did when it came off the assembly line? No. Will it look like it's got 90 plus years of age to it? No. Will it look like it's brand new? No. If somebody asked me, was it refinished? I would say yes. If I was to ever sell it, absolutely. It's one of the reasons I document this stuff, is so people know what has been done to the items I work on. Alright, I hope that satisfies everyone. Also keep in mind, I got this for $5. It was about to go into a landfill. So even if I painted this neon fluorescent green and pink, keep in mind it was either that or nobody would ever see it again. Here's another look at the stripped veneer. You know, I could totally understand why somebody would just want to clear coat this, or a little bit of staining clear coat it, because this is a really nice veneer. It's tough to find old growth mahogany veneer these days. And this, it's remarkable. Typically you'd see some wear around the knobs that are used on a regular basis. Sure, there was an escutcheon, sure there was finish on here, but even so, there's usually some kind of dings around the knobs that were used hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And there just isn't. This whole front is just in remarkably good condition. And on the sides, there were some areas where it looked like somebody had kind of gouged it up. But once the finish was gone, the wood looked to be in really good shape. This end in particular looked absolutely miserable, like somebody had been playing tic-tac-toe on it. And there are some scratches after stripping, but they're really minor. If it was worse, I might consider trying to steam them out, but I just don't think it's warranted, because steaming can introduce more problems. So what am I talking about? You could soak a rag and put it over this, and then get an iron, and then put it against it, and drive steam into the wood. What that will do is help relax fibers that got crushed by somebody scoring this, and if you're lucky, it'll come out. But there's some problems. One, whole area can swell up. Two, there's probably still some color and grain filler and whatnot down in this wood. Steaming it can kind of release that, and it could discolor this, it could bleed it, it could make it look different than the surrounding area. So for something this minor on the end of the cabinet, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm worried about making things worse. Likewise, there's a slight cut there. Could try steaming that out, but nah. Alright, so how do we get the nooks and crannies filled out? Well, we're going to be using Q-tips and a brush and some paper towels. Another sign of a poor refinishing job is when you can look in the crevices and you can see remains, old build-up from the old finish. So we're just, for the panels, the recessed panels, we're just going to go around all the corners and do this. Q-tips are cheap. Buy them at Costco, I got thousands, so that's not a problem. Just using lacquer thinner again. Alright, so that'll be that, and do the same thing here. And for this is where I'll get a brush out. And you just want to get a paper towel before the lacquer thinner evaporates. Good enough. Alrighty, cabinet's completely stripped. Time to move on to the next step, which is to fill in the grain. I'm going to be using this Mohawk mahogany grain filler. But before I do that, I need to seal this because that stuff is tinted. And if I put it on the raw wood, it's going to stain all of it. It's going to make it really dark. It'll look terrible. Okay, I have two choices with the products I have on hand. I can use the same spray shellac like I used on the interior of the cabinet, or I can use this brush-on sanding sealer. I like both of these products. I like this a little bit more though because it's water-based, no odor. I can use it inside, and it sets up in an hour. Downside is, and it's inexpensive, and I can get it at any local home improvement center around here. Downside is, well, just like the name says, sanding sealer. This brushes on. There will be brush marks. I'm going to need to sand. I don't want to sand. I said we could refinish this without sanding, and we could. This is really smooth. If we were to spray on and do a really good job on each layer, we wouldn't need to do anything beyond maybe rub out the final finish. Downside to this, it says it dries in minutes. Not really. Not to the point where you can sand it or move on. It's going to be a little bit of gummy, and it's going to outgas for a while. You dry to the touch in minutes, but there's going to be some lingering solvent. I would want to wait a good day before moving on. As I mentioned earlier, it's a #1 issue I've had with refinishing is rushing steps, and then you get outgassing or interaction between layers. So I'm going to go with this. The hassle with sanding this is we've got this trim. This panel is recessed on all four sides. I can't use a sanding block and just go up right off the edge. I'm going to keep hitting this. And I don't want to sand that down. And plus the grain on this runs this way and then that runs that way. So what I'm going to have to do is take sandpaper or a sanding block and just sand the interior and do the best I can to get up to the edge and get into the corner. That stuff's really easy to sand. It's not that big a deal, but sanding's no fun. Nobody likes to sand. I prefer not to, but we'll keep it to a minimum. So I'm going to break off here. We'll pick up in the next video because I want to devote a bit of time to grain filling because I think it's one of the most frustrating parts of the process, and it was a part of the process that's not very well understood. So I am going to brush this on. It looks kind of like milk. I've shown this in a bunch of videos. You just brush it on, it dries in an hour or two, and then lightly sand it. This will also help fill in the pores. I mean, I could put on 5-6 layers of this and sand it down, and it would probably completely fill in the pores, but that's a lot of work. That's a lot of sanding, so it gets kind of silly. That's why products like this exist.